All right, hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about transformative text, your final task for the semester. So I'm really excited because I think transformative texts are a really fascinating way to approach creativity. This is my sort of second time up doing this sort of podcast thing, so please, cut me some slack. Don't pause my face on, um, when I pull a funny face or something. Come on, meme. Anyway, transformative text. As you can see from my cover slide here, I've got a range of novels and plays that you may or may not have heard of. I mean, you all should have heard of Ulysses, which is the story of Odysseus, the Odyssey, who comes back from Troy and encounters Circe the witch, the Cyclops, the sirens. And so that's a transformative text that James Joyce wrote in response to Homer's The Odyssey. Interestingly, Margaret Atwood's Penelopead. This text is fascinating because if you don't know the myth, Odysseus, this brave Greek warrior, has his wife Penelope at home, and she's not really a major character in the myth. She's just waiting at home, a very very good patient wife. For 20 years she waits for him. She doesn't take any other husband. She weaves her tapestry, and she's kind of portrayed as this subservient woman. But Margaret Atwood recently wrote this transformative text which tells the Odyssey from Penelope's perspective. So I think it's super fascinating to see her side of the story. Similarly, these two texts, Ransom and the Song of Achilles, are based on the myth of Achilles, the Iliad. Anyone seen Troy? Brad Pitt, Orlando Bloom, Eric Bana. It's a great movie, you should watch it. But yes, these two texts are both really modern. They're both produced in the last sort of 10 years or so. And they retell the Iliad. So this one here focuses on Patroclus, who is Achilles' kind of cousin friend in this novel, and it tells the story from Patroclus' perspective. He's only a minor character in the Iliad, and it's got this homosexual side to it. So Patroclus loves Achilles in this novel and then has this, love and desire for him. So it's fascinating. Ransom. The myths of Troy and Achilles and ancient Greek warriors are all about upper class characters, all about famous heroic warriors. Ransom, in this novel, Australian author, he inserts his own character into this famous story. Just a regular man called Somax. If you like this ancient Greek stuff, I recommend it. And some few other ones. These three are all based on Shakespeare plays. I find this one, in nutshell, the most fascinating. What it does, Ian McEwan has taken one line from Hamlet and he's converted this into a whole new novel which tells the story of Hamlet from Hamlet's perspective as a fetus inside the womb. It's truly fascinating. Anyway, just some ideas. Let's get started. So what does transformation actually mean? I mean, a very obvious definition would be that it's a marked change in form, nature, or appearance. A process by which one figure is converted into another of similar value. So I suppose these definitions kind of ring true into what transformative texts are. I like the word metamorphosis. That's a nice way to put it. It's not so much, the caterpillar to the butterfly. It's not like a linear progression. I like to think of transformative texts as kind of dialogic. They're constantly informing on each other. If you read the transformed version, it's always now going to affect the way you read the original. So I find it really fascinating how they have this kind of back and forth binary type of relationship. This guy here, his name's T.S. Eliot. He was kind of a really pompous, snobby poet, but he made some interesting insights. He said, immature poets imitate, mature poets steal, bad poets deface what they take, and good poets make it into something better, or at least something different. So what's he saying here? He's saying that mature poets steal, and good poets make it into something better. So I'm going to ask you, I'm sure you've done it. Have you ever taken your friend's homework or their assignment because you hadn't done yours, and you looked at theirs and you're like, yeah, all right, but I'm going to make mine better, and you end up getting a better grade? I think that's what he's saying here. He's saying good writers and artists, they take what they've seen already, but they make it better. And that's kind of unique in its own way, even though it's not original. Shakespeare stole so much stuff. Harry Potter sounds like Star Wars, Everything is kind of related to each other, interestingly. Yes, thank you, T.S. Eliot. Interestingly, also this idea of transformative text is there is nothing new under the sun. This quote from the Bible. So It's kind of this idea how the way the human brain works is about experience and association. So everything you think has to come from somewhere else, doesn't it? And does anyone know what do we call the relationship between texts? It's a word that starts with I. So intertextuality. Yep. Fancy word. It just means the relationship between texts. This lady here, alive, she proposes lots of theories on this idea of intertextuality, Julia Kristeva. She says it denotes the transposition of several sign systems onto another. She says that a text is not isolated. A text doesn't exist on its own. Instead, it's an absorption and transformation of another. So every text you read has taken bits, taken parts of another text, or multiple texts for that matter. Okay, this big word here, genre. It's not really a big word, it's actually quite a small word. But genre, I think you really have to understand what this term means when we're talking about transformative texts. Because what it often involves is taking the original genre, so taking a artwork, a painting, that's a genre, and transforming that genre. Say you wanted to write a poem inspired by the artwork, or say you've got a short story, you want to convert that into a poem, or whatever. You might take a novel and convert it into a play script, or like the very common thing, taking a novel and converting it into a film. What happens when you switch genres? What meanings are lost? What meanings are gained? Think about it. Ideas of medium specificity. Who has ever complained about, the film wasn't as good as the book, or the film was way better than the book, which I think is true of Fight Club, the movie, if you've seen it. But yeah, so I think genre is really important in conveying meaning, in discerning its different meanings in texts. Okay, moving on. So what exactly is a transformative text then? Put it simply, it's involving the creator taking a precursor, original text, inverted commas, to create a new text which is strongly influenced by the original. It's a type of intertextuality which involves taking the whole part or elements of the precursor text and creating something else that closely engages with the original. And authors normally do this to say something new or different. There's no point transformative text if you haven't got a purpose behind it. Why are you taking this text and changing it? What do you want to say that's different about it? It must be more than just an illusion. So, for example, in The Messenger, Susak alludes to Wuthering Heights. This does not mean that The Messenger is a transformative text of Wuthering Heights. It's just an illusion. They highlight the importance of artistic form to convey meaning. So why is the meaning different in a painting than in a poem? What features of that text type convey that meaning in a better way? And interestingly, we look at Romeo and Juliet, the film, for example. Baz Luhrmann took a middle-aged, early modern European play and transformed it into the 20th century, late 20th century, showing how these old texts, through transformation, can still be relevant, which I think is really, really awesome. If you're going to do Lit in Year 11 and 12, it's important you understand this concept because it's in the curriculum in English Lit Studies. So SACE says in their curriculum, the transformative text requires students to select a text and transform it, or an aspect of it, into another form. The accompanying writer's statement, so your reflection, your analysis of your own work, should outline the choices the student has made in terms of the text type, audience, and purpose. So if you think about it, with Baz Luhrmann's example, Romeo and Juliet, what was his purpose? To bring Shakespeare into the modern world, to show the relationship between, young love and gang violence or whatever, between the old play. And who was his audience? Modern people, modern 20th century audiences. That was his purpose in transforming. And obviously he's changed the text type. He's made it into a film, which obviously changes a lot of things in terms of the original text. Now, you're doing well, guys. Stay with me. In writing and rewriting transformative text, authors can make a range of choices. So obviously they can change the medium. Yep, all film adaptations of novels are transformative texts. this is a common one, they can often change the historical context or the setting to modernise, to go back, whatever. They can change the gender of leading characters. So I've seen many a play with Shakespearean characters who are generally male, played as female, and how does that differ? How does that make us think about these ideas and these characters? What's a good example? What if Ed was a girl? How would that story be different? Very, very interesting thought. Anyway, they could insert their own characters like Maloof did in Ransom. Insert your own made-up character, and how could they interplay with the world of the story? They can expand on details and characters not covered or glossed over in the original text. So think of a small detail that's glossed over in The Messenger and think, how could you take that little detail and expand it into something else? Different perspective is a really obvious one, so you might want to write The Messenger from Marv's perspective. Would be a hilarious story, I think, even more so. Or from Richie's perspective, or, whoever. Express the meaning in another format, subvert and change the text by undercutting it. So you might want to say this text is wrong. So the Penelopiad, which I talked about earlier, kind of undercuts the Odyssey and the male-dominated world that it sort of lives in. A spin-off, a parody, you've all seen parodies before. And it should be creative. Has anyone seen a Harry Potter musical? That would be a parody. Has to be creative and has to consider the language, style, characters, themes of the original when they transform them. So if you were to transform Susak's Messenger, you might want to use personification because he uses it so well in your transformative version, perhaps. Anyway, we've been through this stuff. Good. Here are some examples of transformative texts you may know. She's the Man is actually Twelfth Night by Shakespeare. 10 Things I Hate About You is also the Taming of the Shrew play. The movie Clueless is inspired by Jane Austen's novel Emma, Victorian novel. The Tempest is Margaret Atwood's new novel. If you didn't know already, that Lion King is Hamlet. Yeah, it's inspired many transformative texts. This ancient Greek play, Antigone, was reimagined in World War II France, occupied by Germany, and the new meaning this play takes on when this author took it and put it in this modern setting was really astonishing. Again, I talked about these, the Iliad and the Odyssey. These are just some. There are so many transformative texts out there. Don't really need to go through this. You can go through it sometime. They're just excerpts showing the relationship between transformative texts, which are highly metafictional. They refer to themselves as a transformation. So in that French version of Antigone, Creon says, I want you to know what took place in the wings of this drama, in which you are burning to play a part. So it's saying how Antigone is a kind of self-conscious character in her own play. That novel, in a nutshell, I referenced before, it was inspired by this one line from the entire Hamlet play. It says, I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself a king of infinite space, were it not that I have bad dreams. And he just took that one line and said, yep, I'm going to tell the story of Hamlet from inside the womb. Hilarious. Brilliant. And another quote from Penelopiad, which is saying, who'd want to know the story of a plain but smart wife? I'm going to tell you. Anyway, so because I'm not here today, we can't do this in sort of live time, but I wanted you to think just to yourself. Now that we know a bit about transformative texts, what are some ways you could transform the classic fairy tale of Snow White, or whatever it is, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs? What could you do to make it different? Just have a think. I think it's fascinating. The other class came up with some ideas. They said Snow White's actually a man and all the dwarves are women. How weird does that, just by switching the gender, how much of a more sinister notion does that take on? There's so many things you can do. And be wary that transformative texts don't just change the plot. While that often happens, so, she doesn't meet the prince in the end, isn't quite transformative enough. Like, it's still a good step, though.